Welcome to this explainer. Right now, the US-Iran conflict is an incredibly chaotic, fast-moving situation filled with military threats, frantic back-channel diplomacy, and huge geopolitical ripples. My goal today is to cut right through the noise. We're going to rely on the latest reports and visual breakdowns to make sense of what is happening, why it's happening, and what it all means for the world. So let's dive right in.
To keep things clear, we've organized these rapid-fire updates into 5 quick chapters: an hour from escalation, the push for peace, global ripples and retaliation, the human toll, and finally, how the Senate pushes back.
Let's jump straight into Chapter 1, an hour from escalation. We literally came within a razor-thin margin of full-scale regional bombardment this week, and it is wild to see how fast things shifted. Think about it. On Monday evening, U.S. military strikes on Iran were completely locked in and planned. But then, late Monday, Persian Gulf allies stepped in, citing progress in peace talks, and those strikes were abruptly canceled. By Tuesday, President Trump is telling reporters he was just an hour away from giving the green light. He noted he'd allow a limited 2 to 3 day window for talks to happen, but warned he could strike at a moment's notice. And then, on Wednesday, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps fired back with a massive threat of their own.
In response to that near strike, Iran's powerful IRGC issued this incredibly stark warning. They promised to expand the war way beyond the region if the US or Israel resume attacks, stating they haven't even brought all their capacities into action yet. What is truly alarming here is the sheer scope of this threat. They are explicitly saying this won't stay localized to the Middle East, promising crushing blows in places the US and its allies cannot even imagine. That tells us the stakes of this current pause in hostilities absolutely could not be higher.
And get this, reports from Haaretz indicate that Israel's military was entirely blindsided by that last-minute cancellation. Israeli commanders fully assumed they would be closely coordinated with before any strikes or pauses, especially since they believed any renewed attacks could immediately drag Israel into the fight. Instead, they found out about the near miss after the fact. That lack of communication is creating a massive point of friction between military allies right now.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, the push for peace. With that 2 to 3 day clock ticking loudly, back-channel diplomacy is completely in overdrive to make this pause permanent. Pakistan has really stepped up as a huge mediator here. Their interior minister just touched down in Tehran on Wednesday, which is actually the second high-level visit from Pakistan in under a week. It was these exact efforts, along with Persian Gulf allies pointing to serious negotiations, that convinced the US to hit the brakes on Monday. Pakistan is basically the crucial bridge trying to hold this peace together.
A senior Pakistani diplomat summed it up perfectly to CBS News, saying, "Restarting war would be a total disaster for everyone." They acknowledged the frustrations, but made it clear that going back to conflict would be catastrophic across the board. You can literally feel the pressure in that statement, and that urgency is exactly what is fueling these back-to-back diplomatic sprints to Tehran.
Moving out to the wider world, let's look at Chapter 3, Global Ripples and Retaliation. This standoff isn't just about military might. It is sending absolute shockwaves through the global economy. Take a look at this massive number, 2 million. That is the number of barrels of oil currently, and very cautiously, navigating through the volatile Strait of Hormuz on a single South Korean tanker. Because the strait is one of the world's most vital maritime choke points, the threat of war has the entire global energy market on high alert.
That ship, the Universal Winner, is actually the very first South Korean-flagged vessel to even try this route since the conflict started, and they are doing it under a heavy shadow. Remember, back on May 4th, another South Korean-operated vessel was hit by unidentified airborne objects. South Korea strongly condemned that attack, and Iran vehemently denied having anything to do with it. So this transit is highly sensitive. Seoul even confirmed they thoroughly consulted with Iranian authorities before letting this ship sail. The caution here is palpable.
Meanwhile, global heavyweights are stepping into the ring. Over in Beijing, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin are officially aligning. Xi called a ceasefire an utmost urgency and said resuming hostilities is inadvisable. The two nations even put out a joint statement condemning previous US and Israeli strikes as illegal and destabilizing. On top of that, Russia's deputy foreign minister stepped forward offering to provide any assistance possible to resolve things. We are seeing the world's biggest superpowers firmly positioning themselves in direct diplomatic opposition to the US military stance.
Now we need to talk about Chapter 4, the human toll.
Beneath all this geopolitical maneuvering, there is a deeply contested, devastating reality on the ground. We have to look at this grim figure. 165. That is the number of people, including many young students, who were killed in a February 28th bombing of a girls' elementary school in southern Iran.
This happened on the very first day of the U.S.-Israeli war, and it remains one of the most hotly debated, tragic events of the entire conflict.
The narratives around what actually happened are completely incompatible. On one side, the head of U.S. Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, says the strike is under investigation but calls it complex, claiming the school was actually located right on an active IRGC missile site. On the exact opposite side, Iran's foreign ministry completely slammed that claim. They are calling the U.S. assertion a shameless distortion and a baseless fabrication and demanding that the commanders responsible be held accountable under international law. We are looking at two totally opposite stories regarding a massive loss of civilian life.
And this debate isn't just happening internationally, it is causing serious friction right inside the U.S. government. Representative Adam Smith publicly cast doubt on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon's official story. Despite Admiral Cooper promising transparency, Representative Smith was blunt, saying, "I do not trust that answer." He even accused the defense secretary of showing a callous disregard for protecting civilian life. So this tragedy is actively sparking intense dissent and distrust within the American political system itself.
Which sets up our final section perfectly. Chapter 5, The Senate Pushes Back.
With all this tension, U.S. lawmakers are attempting a really rare maneuver to reel in the commander-in-chief. After failing 7 times before, the Senate just made history by successfully advancing a resolution designed to limit President Trump's war powers regarding Iran. It was a nail-biter of a vote, 50 in favor to advance, 47 opposed, and 3 who didn't vote. This is a massive institutional pushback. The legislative branch is finally moving to check the executive's ability to wage this specific war without congressional approval.
When we dig into the numbers, things got incredibly interesting. We saw a rare bipartisan alignment where 4 Republicans crossed the aisle to join the Democrats. Senators Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, and Bill Cassidy all voted to advance. For Cassidy, this was his first time ever supporting a measure like this, notably happening right after he failed to advance in a GOP primary where the president endorsed his opponent. Meanwhile, John Fetterman was the sole Democrat to vote against advancing it. You can clearly see how the looming threat of regional war is completely scrambling the political calculus in Washington.
Now, practically speaking, even if this resolution clears both the House and Senate, everyone acknowledges President Trump is highly likely to veto it. But lawmakers pushing for this argue that's completely beside the point. They believe forcing this vote acts as a massive, flashing warning sign. It's a powerful indicator of the domestic resistance the White House now faces, and they hope it might actually shift the president's military strategy going forward. So, that leaves us with one critical question for you to chew on. With the war paused, but definitely not ended, can this frantic back-channel diplomacy outpace the momentum of the military? Or are we really just waiting for the clock to run out? We came inches from a massive escalation. We've seen global superpowers taking sides, the heartbreaking human toll, and unprecedented political pushback at home. As that 2 to 3 day window for talks ticks down to 0, the whole world is holding its breath. Will the mediators in Tehran find a miracle breakthrough, or is the IRGC's threat of a global war about to become our new reality? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the news, because this story is far from over.